A larger-than-life businessman gunned down in his office.
But will the discovery of his secret double life lead to the killer? An all-new 2020 starts right now.
So in broad daylight, a man is shot dead in his place of business on a busy street.
I knew as soon as I saw it. I knew he was gone.
Just 2 blocks behind me, Bob Eidman was found robbed and murdered.
Bob Eidman was shot 3 times. That 3rd shot is being an execution.
I just all the way there saying, no, 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 Bob, no, Bob.
There were just floods and floods of police cars coming in and just total chaos.
We're with the Major Case Squad.
They only have 5 days, so the clock is ticking.
Diane found out on the site that her husband had been murdered.
Yes, she did.
She makes this statement, something like this has happened before.
There were numerous individuals who could have done something such as this.
He asked me a question that just kind of floored me. He said, "We're trying to find out about your brother's lifestyle."
What is it like to all of a sudden learn that there's this whole other secret part of his life?
People are going to find out some stuff they're probably not going to like.
June 8th, 2007 was a typical day in St. Charles. It was a sunny day, and I was proceeding southwest here on First Capitol Drive.
So it was about to break 80 degrees on this Friday morning around 11 a.m. And as Officer Dean Meyer's patrol car is making its way toward Interstate 70, a mail carrier was on her rounds too. This security video showing her dropping off mail at a strip mall grocery store, then driving her truck a few doors down to enter the office where Bob Eidman sold car insurance. Nobody heard her first scream.
Our mail carrier was running up the street, and she was flailing her arms, and she was yelling for the police.
Deborah Kennedy was the first person to hear those desperate cries and tried to catch up with her as the mail carrier ran into traffic on the busy road before Officer Meyer spotted her.
I saw the mail carrier running up the hill with the phone in her hand.
Stop, please stop! There's a man, I'm delivering the mail right now, he's lying on the floor with blood all over him.
I asked what's going on, and she said Bob was laying on the floor and he had blood on his face.
And she tries to investigate what's going on. She goes into Bob's office and gets the shock of her life.
I went inside to see if I could help him. And when I walked in, there was plenty of blood. I watched his chest didn't move. I knew as soon as I saw it. I knew he was gone. Let me breathe for a second.
It was St. Charles's first murder of 2007. And right from the start, it was the kind of thing that just isn't supposed to happen here. That's because St. Charles, Missouri is an idyllic bedroom community. It's just over the bridge from St. Louis with a historic downtown and historic values as well. I guess the idea is that you're supposed to shed the stress of the big city as you come across the wide Missouri River and land here. But as we know, money woes, lies and rage and desperation, the grip of fear, they do not stop at the river's edge.
Now we've got a whole team of officers from the St. Charles Police Department. They've converged on the scene of Bob Eidman's murder.
There were just, floods and floods of police cars coming in and just total chaos.
Immediately I responded to the area, to the scene. Bob is laying on the floor between the 2 desks. He's laying on his back, and there's a pool of blood around his head.
Bob Eidman was shot 3 times. The first shot was superficial. It was a grazing wound to his chin. The second shot was to his neck, shoulder area, which knocked him down.
According to St. Charles homicide detective Don Stepp, the third and fatal shot had been fired through Bob Eidman's left eye as the assailant stood over his prone body.
I would definitely classify that third shot as being an execution.
This was an insurance office, and it was a fairly open area. We collected bullet casings, bullets, bullet fragments. We would mark the position, set up little yellow tents called photo markers. We would photograph it. We dusted for fingerprints. You're hoping that maybe you will find one fingerprint that may lead to a particular suspect.
Police are seeking out anyone who might have spotted something that morning in Bob's office. With her office directly below Bob's, Deborah Kennedy didn't see anyone, but she might have heard something.
I think it was probably around 10:30 or 11 o'clock. A friend of mine had come in. You know, I heard a couple noises, and we both kind of looked at each other, and then I heard a big thud on my ceiling. And we're kind of like, what the heck, is Bob doing up there? And so, being the way I am, I yelled up through the rafters, hey, Bob, keep it down. I'm trying to work down here.
We came to the conclusion that those loud bangs that she heard was the gunshots in Bob's office.
Police quickly worked to gather information about the victim. His name is Bob Eidman. He's 48 years old. He was married for a very long time, had no children, and worked in the insurance industry.
But just recently, like the past 2 years, had just started this new company. He'd got like a franchise. He just started that on his own.
As news begins to spread that something bad has happened at Bob's office, concerned friends and associates in the insurance business, they rush to the site, like the longtime colleague who asked that we call her Dana. What made you want to go over there?
That's my friend. I wanted to make sure he was okay. I remember locking up my office. I had a client in there, and she saw how distraught I was. And I'm just in the car, just all the way there saying, no, no, Bob.
What happened when you got there?
Of course, they're spectators, so someone said that someone got shot. Didn't see Bob, didn't see him waving in the window, didn't see any sign of him at all. And then when they took his body out of the office, we knew it was Bob's body because he was a big guy.
What's that moment like?
Oh my goodness. It was the worst.
Local reporters have arrived on the scene as well. Those reporters notice that a woman pulls up, and it turns out that she is the now widow of Robert Eidman. Her name is Diane, and Diane approaches the reporters, asking them if they know what's happening. And the reporters are saying that they feel uncomfortable telling her about her husband, so they direct her to the police.
But Diane said that she hadn't heard from Bob all day, which was odd, and she kept trying to call him, and he never answered the office phone. So when she shows up and seen all the police cars, she knew something had happened, and she identified herself.
Diane found out on the site, didn't she, that her husband had been murdered?
Yes, she did.
As investigators comb the area looking for video of any potential suspects, they happen upon this grocery store just a few doors down from Bob Eidman's office. Inside, they take note of the security camera that captured the mail carrier earlier that morning. It was right about there, pointed directly towards the front door. Once they get a look at the video it recorded, it's the first big break in the case.
Police believe Eidman was working alone when someone walked inside his business, fatally shot him, then took off.
Insurance agent Bob Eidman is dead, shot to death in his office along a busy thoroughfare near the interstate in St. Charles, Missouri.
We are west of the city of St. Louis, which most people kind of relate that to the arch.
They are just separated by a river, so just hop on the bridge and you're in St. Charles.
And like this town's famous Christmas tradition celebration and their lively Oktoberfest, murder comes but once a year.
St. Charles averages about 1.5 homicides a year.
It's a pretty peaceful community, and people look out for each other.
cold-blooded murder is not something St. Charles is known for, and the local cops will probably need some help with what looks like a big investigation. So they appeal to a special group for help.
A request was made to notify the Major Case Squad.
And they contact other departments that are in our area, and they send detectives to assist us.
More than 30 detectives with the Major Case Squad are now looking for his killer.
This elite Major Case Squad has a very high rate of success. 80% of their cases are solved. But with all this manpower, there's one catch. They only have 5 days to get the job done. So the clock is ticking.
They're coming from all other agencies. At some point, they need to get back to theirs.
The police canvassed First Capital right there in front of the shop.
How you doing?
Hi, what's up?
We're with the Major Case Squad, and we're investigating a homicide that happened here Friday afternoon.
Asking, did you notice something on June 7th?
And then you can see in the distance those apartment houses. You talked to all the people who lived in those apartment houses too, didn't you?
Every door was knocked on multiple times until we got contact.
And could one part of Bob Eidman's line of work have put him in jeopardy?
Robert Eidman's specialty in the insurance company was dealing with high-risk drivers, individuals that could not get insurance through traditional places, people that had prior traffic violations.
He wasn't taking checks because apparently those had been bounced, and this was back in the day when checks were a thing.
But his good friend and insurance colleague Dana, she felt Bob was taking too great a risk with the form of payment he did take.
So he would accept cash against a lot of people who advised him not to take cash.
Though he was known for accepting cash, he doesn't have a safe. Instead, police learned Bob would put the cash he received from clients into a far less secure place.
There was a drawer in Bob's desk that was locked, and you'd have to use a screwdriver to manipulate the lock to be able to open it.
When police managed to open the drawer and they checked the cash box, oh, there's money inside, about $200.
There was no forced entry, but it could have absolutely been a robbery. I know one of the things they were looking for was Bob's wallet missing.
And you're looking for anywhere that somebody might have thrown something, like Bob Eidman's wallet.
From the top of the roof, all through the grass, ditches, sewers, everywhere. We could not find the wallet. The wallet's going to be 90% of the time in a man's back pocket.
And to get that wallet out, you would have had to struggle between the wallet and the inside of the pants, which caused some friction. I recommended that we cut the pants pockets out and send them to the crime lab. We just thought maybe a sample of skin cells could be found inside Bob's pocket.
When we touch something or brush up against something, some of our DNA is transferred to the other object. If they're located, those skin cells can be broken down into DNA.
So you were checking for DNA everywhere else, but this was just kind of out of the blue. You just thought, well, you know, we might as well give this a try.
Yes, sir. It was the first time that I'd ever heard of anybody's pants pockets getting cut out.
While one team is feverishly working to gather physical evidence, another team is talking to anyone they can find, talking to family, friends, anything that will help them glean information about Bob Eidman.
Bob was a big teddy bear. He was friendly, he was bubbly. He called me wild woman. I think it has something to do with my hair. It grew on me.
Bob was a funny little guy, and I say little meaning that I think he was probably about 5'4", 5'6".
If we were going to say what size personality he had, like small to large, where would you put him on the scale there, Pam?
I'd say extra large.
His persona was just so, hey, you guys see me? I'm here.
How would you describe his relationship to authority growing up?
Not good. He defied authority with regularity. He had to go to summer school every summer. In fact, my parents tried to bribe him and said, hey, if you can graduate from high school in 4 years, we'll give you a car. He's like, show me the car first.
We were in high school together. Bob was pretty forward. He liked to talk to the ladies and hang out and visit. Then he met Diane, and he fell in love with her, and they were real close.
I believe Diane and Bobby made a fantastic couple. I really liked Diane. She'd put Bobby in his place. Bobby say something smart, she'd say something smart right back at him.
She was taller than him. I don't think it really mattered to him at all.
He ended up getting some lifts, so he felt like he was as tall as his wife.
Bob and Diane had been married for 20 plus years. They did not have any children.
So instead, his office featured photos of the muscle cars that he loved, while under his desk, he kept a copy of the Dream Girls CD. He finally got to be his own boss, but there were great challenges, weren't there?
Yeah, he started talking like, well, the business isn't doing so good. I haven't had that many people come in.
He kept saying, you know, if I don't make this in the next couple months, I'm not sure.
I might go under.
Yeah, I'm not sure I'm going to be able to make it.
Think about all that financial stress. At least one person thinks it was taking a terrible toll.
I thought he committed suicide.
You thought he was so despondent that he might have taken his own life.
I did.
Remember that video camera in the grocery store next to Bob's, pointing toward the street in front? Police have been poring over the footage, and now they may have found something of interest. There, that white car.
At 10:50 a.m., you see the vehicle drive past the front doors, and 4 minutes later, you see it drive past the front doors, I believe a little slower, and almost like creeping along looking for something.
Was this driver making sure the coast was clear?
It wasn't the greatest picture, I remember that. It's always frustrating when you can't identify the people inside the vehicle.
One thing we can tell is a white four-door vehicle. Luckily,
I'm impressed you can tell it's a four-door vehicle. It looks like a white car. But it turned out the small St. Charles Police Department had a car maven.
we have an individual at the time that could almost identify almost any type of vehicle. He was a big car guy. He said it was a Ford Focus.
Like, I like cars, but honestly, wow.
We're kind of looking at this several different ways. Is he having problems with a customer with a white Ford Focus?
The bad news is that in St. Charles County, there are 1,300 Ford Focuses. In the state of Missouri, there are 5,000.
5,000 is a big number to have to deal with.
But they're not finding anything suspicious until a gift-wrapped lead suddenly falls into their lap. A white car is crashed and abandoned nearby. And get this about the driver.
He had bloody clothing on. Why has he got Bob's business card? I hope this is it.
A mail carrier found Eidman's body shot several times inside his Brook Auto Insurance agency at about 12:30 Friday afternoon.
So in broad daylight, a man is shot dead in his place of business on a busy street. I'm sure it did strike fear.
I don't understand why somebody would kill somebody right here.
It was such a senseless killing that nobody really understood what was going on.
I didn't want to go back to work the next morning. I wanted to get the heck out of Dodge. I wanted to get out of town.
Police here in St. Charles, Missouri still had no motive, no witnesses, and no way to quell the rising fear of the St. Charles community. Fear and anxiety that grew even more after 3 men broke into a bowling alley, took $700, and tied up the janitor in the process.
2 men wearing masks and carrying guns rob a St. Charles bowling alley.
Well, here is proof they had a gun, a bullet hole left in the office windows. They busted in through the back door, shot up the office, tried to shoot open a safe.
Geographically, it was just down the street from Brooks Insurance.
And it was a bowling alley that we all bowled at, so at first we all thought it was tied together.
So people wondered if there was a connection between the 2 robberies.
And we looked at that, seeing if they were connected. And in the course of that investigation, we were able to eliminate it from being a part of this case.
Police are knee-deep in Bob Eidman's murder investigation, and they come upon a really interesting scene. It's an abandoned, crashed white car. And when they track down the owner, well, there's a couple of really eye-popping pieces of information.
He had bloody clothing on, and he also had one of Robert Eidman's business cards. Why does he have bloody clothing? Is it his blood? Is it Bob's blood? We have some questions we need answered. This could be it.
It blew my mind, like, whoa.
Travis Wade Ensley is about to blow a lot of minds at police headquarters, where leads in Bob Eidman's murder have been hard to come by.
The car that I wrecked was a white four-door Saturn.
Which might have looked like the car that was captured on the footage.
The next thing I know, I'm at St. Charles Police Station getting questioned for murder.
Police now feel that he has a lot of explaining to do. So as Travis recalls, his story goes kind of something like this.
I needed new insurance on my car. My buddy's like, check this guy out, and called him up, gave me good rates. And then like a week later, I had been out, had a couple drinks. Okay. I wound up wrecking my car right by my apartment. My airbags deployed and it knocked the sense out of me, and I like staggered down the hill, like right to my apartment, didn't remember nothing.
Okay.
Next day, I woke up, I walk out my door, my car's not there.
So Travis calls police to report his car as stolen, but then is stunned to suddenly find himself a potential person of interest in a murder.
I was scared to death.
They were coming at you.
Yeah, they were coming at me pretty good.
Travis has what seems like a likely story about why there's blood on a shirt. He said that when he crashed his car, he got a bloody nose. Cops will check out his story, so they're not quite ready to clear him.
And they went and looked into certain, my alibi and this and that. They're like, okay, yeah, he's not the guy.
Now, police turn their attention closer to home, to Bob Eidman's widow, Diane. It is quite routine for police to look at the spouse of someone who's been murdered.
When Bob's wife, Diane, was advised that Bob had been murdered in his office, she didn't have a great reaction.
While Diane does appear to be upset in this photo, some detectives at the scene felt she was not overly emotional.
I don't want to say it didn't seem like a surprise to her, but she wasn't reacting in a manner that I thought a wife would react when they found out their husband was shot.
That struck me, and I'm sure several detectives, as unusual.
Is she in shock? Is she in denial? Is she involved in this?
Then there's Detective Stephanie Kaiser. Already a veteran sex crimes investigator, Kaiser was respected for her sensitivity and understanding with victims.
That would be completely normal in a shock situation like that. There is no such thing as a one-size-fits-all when you're talking about trauma, because to be able to process that would take some time. They're moving slow, they can't think, so I make nothing of that behavior.
Now Detective Kaiser is about to become the St. Charles Police Department's Diane Whisperer.
Diane Eidman became my lead. Right. We were assigned to take her from, sadly, the scene.
Diane wants to go to Bob's parents' home so that she can break the terrible news to them. And during that ride, Diane talks about how she is the manager of the kitchen at the local hospital, and she also offers more information about her beloved husband.
She said that there was financial problems.
When you say financial problems, what do you mean?
I mean, they were having a tough time paying bills. According to Diane, there wasn't much cash coming in. The business itself was struggling.
Detective Kaiser continues talking with Diane, and she makes a note that Diane seems incredibly forgetful. She can't remember her own Social Security number. And then the detective asks her about any existing insurance policies.
She was upfront that, yes, I have a life insurance policy through work.
Diane initially gave us an answer that she thought they had a couple of small policies, approximately $5,000.
Not much, right?
Not much.
So Diane was pretty direct with me. I think she'd had a lot of questions asked of her and then just kind of tells me boldly, I did not do this.
These conversations with Diane will shape and reshape the police investigation into Bob Eidman's murder. At the end of that first day, Diane sounds like every other resident of St. Charles. She is terribly afraid.
It's just dawning on her, wait, I'm not safe either. I have to act to get her extra patrol, and I did. But you have to still go where the evidence leads.
And no one knows yet where that evidence will lead, especially in the wake of the very first astonishing story that Diane Eidman tells Detective Kaiser, with words that will be ringing in lots of heads at police headquarters.
One of the first things she says is, don't take this as a confession or anything, but this happened to my dad too. Has her father been murdered and her husband murdered as well? Has lightning struck this woman twice?
At the time of his death, Bob Eidman had been married to his wife Diane for more than 2 decades. And yet, even those closest to him could find Diane to be something of an enigma to them.
Not very outgoing.
No, not very outgoing. She's just kind of shy and quiet. I mean, she just didn't really have a lot to say to anyone, really.
When you would ask Bob about Diane, what kinds of things would he say about her?
You know, his famous saying was, "She's not the person you think she is," and I never knew what that meant.
Now, Detective Kaiser was reeling from the incredible story that Diane had just told her.
She makes this statement, don't take this as a confession, but something like this has happened before. And I'm not quoting Diane at this point, but somebody broke into the house and shot my dad. So when I asked, did they catch the person?
How did she answer that question?
She said, they thought my mom shot my dad.
And we're wondering if lightning had struck twice in the same place.
Diane Bowling Eidman, seen here on her wedding day in 1978 with her father Jerome, was just 26 years old when he was murdered inside the home he shared with his wife Lenore, Diane's mother. The murder case that made headlines in this region all began when a call came through in the wee hours on the morning of April 6, 1984. Gordon Adams was an officer with the St. Louis County PD.
What went out over the radio when you heard the call?
As I recall, like I say, it came out as a home invasion with someone shot. And so that's what we would consider a hot call. Well, when I arrived, it's 2:30 in the morning, maybe 2:35. So it's dark as can be. I immediately went to the door, knocked on the door, and Lenore answered. And the hair is pristine, and she's standing there in a kind of sheer nightgown. And she says, "My husband needs help. He's in the bedroom. He's been shot."
What are you thinking when you're hearing this story for the first time?
I mean, she didn't strike you as a woman who woke up in the middle of the night to find her husband murdered. No tears. The hair was all done. And I'm trying to get information for my report. And she actually lit up a cigarette. And I'm thinking, this is your husband. He's just been murdered. She didn't have any emotion at all, almost.
David Barron was a detective with the St. Louis County Police assigned to the case.
So Lenore Bowling was asserting that an intruder had come into the house, somehow found her husband's service revolver, used that service revolver to kill him, and then left.
That's what she was saying.
How did that strike you as a plausible story, given your years of experience in law enforcement?
It was an improbable set of circumstances. And to throw into that, the garage door was open about a foot.
Okay, that garage door over there was open a foot.
And the inside garage door, leading it from the garage into the house, is the only door in the house that did not have a deadbolt.
Diane's mother had told police she believed she was being stalked in the days prior to the shooting by a black male driving a black car who'd been leaving notes at their home. And there was a note found at the crime scene.
Well, the last note that was found at the scene said, "This is for you, Pig, for what you did to me." No, I made a canvass later on in the neighborhood. No one saw a black male in a black car dressed in all black.
Lenore Bowling was charged with the murder of her husband. She pled not guilty, and while she was awaiting trial, she moved in with Bob and Diane.
How did Bob feel about living with someone who was accused of shooting her husband to death?
Bob was not happy about that.
He was scared.
Yeah,
He would
he
go
was
to
very-
bed every
he was very
night and
scared.
say would bolt his door, lock it closed. He did not, he was afraid. He didn't want to be in the house with her.
After that fateful night, this saga ending here in the fall of 1985. Diane Eidman's mother, Lenore Bowling, on trial for capital murder in the death of her husband, Diane's father, Jerome Bowling. Lenore Bowling found not guilty of her husband's murder.
They did not believe that she did it. They believed her story.
The irony not lost on investigators as Diane Eidman, more than 20 years later, now a person of interest
In a different killing.
Has her father been murdered and her husband murdered as well? What a weird set of circumstances.
But it was something else Diane Eidman told investigators about her own husband that they said gave them pause.
During Diane's initial interview, she was asked if there was any insurance policies. Diane said that she thought there was one policy, and she thought it was just a small policy, approximately $5,000.
She describes that she has a life insurance policy through work. She's not sure about the details on that.
I was contacted by an insurance company and told that there was additional policies for Robert Eidman that we were not made aware of that were quite substantial in size.
Now with Bob's death, police say she was suddenly in line to receive more than $300,000 in life insurance.
We did not know if Diane had forgotten to tell us about those policies. Did Diane know about those policies?
And as they start looking deeper into Bob Eidman, they make a mind-blowing discovery. This man was leading a double life.
And then the commander of the major case squad asked me a question that just kind of floored me. I had no idea.
I went to Bob's funeral, and it was sad to see him there. I didn't expect to go see my friend in a casket, and I felt horrible for his wife and his family.
Bob's older brother by 21 months. Glenn Eidman grew up as a straight-A student, and he was a frequent target of Bob's verbal barbs. How did he feel about you being a policeman?
He made fun of me a lot. He did not like that. Wasn't big on police. He got in trouble growing up.
Glenn always believed that Bob was his mother's favorite. Even so, he said he was not prepared for what he says she asked him to do as they attended Bob's funeral.
At his funeral, my mom, she was confined to a wheelchair. She was in very poor health. So she goes, "How could somebody do this to my boy?" I said, "Mom, I don't know. I don't know why." She goes, "Well, I want you to find those people. I want you to kill them." And I said, "That's not how this works. You know, I'm a police officer. I can't do something like that." But she was very devastated, and literally 3 months after his death, she died.
She just lost her will to live.
It was kind of a rough year, for sure.
I went up to the funeral and seen Diane as she was broken up, but I didn't ask a lot of questions.
She never really said a whole lot. She really didn't say a lot about anything. She was pretty quiet.
I was just watching Diane and just grieving with her. And I noticed there was a large police presence. And I just thought that was odd for a funeral. But if they suspect the murderers to be there, then they were there for a reason.
At the time of Robert Eidman's funeral, we set up surveillance and we recorded video of the attendees at the funeral, as well as obtaining the guest book. for the services.
Police check out every name on the funeral registry. It takes them nowhere. Meanwhile, it's day 4 of the Major Crimes Task Force investigation. The clock is ticking, but still no good leads on who killed Bob Eidman.
We were striking out. There was no one that could really come up and say, Bob's having a problem with anyone.
But then the Major Case Squad does a deep dive into Bob's email, his phone, and computer records. They're searching for any hidden clues. They make a discovery they're eager to know a lot more about, just as Glenn comes in for his interview.
You know, they put me in an interview room to ask me some questions. I said, you know, I have nothing to hide. You don't have to play these games. You know, ask me whatever you want. And he asked me a question that just kind of floored me. He said, we're trying to find out about your brother's alternative lifestyle. I said, what alternative? He goes, his affairs. You know, I go, you think he's out picking up women? I mean, he, you know, that just ain't happening. And he's like, your brother was gay. I had no idea.
We had no idea.
We did not know that.
Turns out this long-married insurance agent was leading a secret double life.
While we were analyzing Bob's computers and it was discovered that he was visiting male-on-male websites that were sexual in nature, and he was making contact with some of these places. Sometimes in these murder investigations, as we dig into them, you find a lot about a person's life, their lifestyle.
When you have a secret, what vulnerability does that give someone like Bob Eidman?
Anytime somebody has a secret and somebody knows it, and you're keeping it a secret for a reason, people can use that as leverage to get their way if they want to blackmail you or extort you.
As investigators continue searching through Bob's phone records, they find something else noteworthy. One phone number keeps popping up, belonging to a man from out of town.
They had an intimate relationship. They would rent a hotel room somewhere and visit each other. Automatically, a flag gets raised.
What is it like to all of a sudden learn that there's this whole other secret part of his life that you knew nothing about?
It was upsetting. I guess I felt he should have been able to talk to somebody about that. He shouldn't have had to hide that life. He shouldn't have had to lie. Having a relationship and being gay that's just part of life. And I wish he would have been able to share that with us. Yeah.
How you doing?
Police bring in this secret lover for questioning. They can't help but wonder, would this man have a reason to murder Bob? And what about Diane? Could his existence have set her into a murderous rage?
We've altered the man's voice.
People are going to find out some stuff they're probably not going to like.
Feelings can run wild with someone. If I can't have you, nobody's going to have you. It gives people motive.
And as a young, untested detective is taking on his very first big murder case, a totally unexpected assist from the cutting edge of forensic science, it's going to take this investigation into surprising territory and bring answers at last to the key question: why was Bob Eidman killed?
It blew my mind when the results came back. It was the golden ticket. This is what we were looking for.
Two blocks behind me, Bob Eidman was found robbed and murdered. Diane found out on the site that her husband had been murdered.
Yes, she did.
She makes this statement, something like this has happened before. Somebody broke into the house and shot my dad.
It absolutely crossed everybody's mind that this was kind of a copycat murder.
I've told her, hey, your husband's been killed. Your marriage is about to be put under a spotlight.
We discovered that Bob was having an affair.
She had found out that he was having an affair with another man, and that she was very angry about that.
They'd had an argument about that.
Diane was asking, are you telling me my husband's gay?
This is one of those bizarre cases where all the evidence seems to be pointing in one direction, then suddenly the rug is pulled out from under you, stunning everyone.
I was very shocked.
We cut open the pocket, swabbed the edges, hoping to get possible DNA. And the next day, state gave me the name.
I was sitting in the same room with the person that shot and killed my brother.
Friends and family are mourning the loss of Bob Eidman, gunned down in his office in a small strip mall in St. Charles, Missouri.
A man that loved life, always wanted to have fun, always wanted to enjoy himself. He had a great personality, very funny, you know, very intelligent.
You know, he seemed like a nice guy, but after you got to know him a bit, that's when the Bobby came out. I mean, it was extremely comical. He'd make me laugh so hard. I mean, it would hurt.
He liked to have fun. He loved muscle cars. And as far as in the office, you heard him. He was a loud guy. He was one of those guys that when he got on the phone, you kind of put your earplugs in because he was pretty loud. Larger than life, he was.
I could depend on him when I was not in a great place. He would talk and he made sense.
Now Bob Eidman was dead, and nothing made sense. It was a little before 11 a.m. on June 8th when a mail carrier discovered Bob's lifeless body on the floor of his office.
Stop, please stop! There's a man, I'm delivering the mail right now, he's lying on the floor with blood all over him.
Bob Eidman was shot 3 times.
There was no forced entry or anything. He was a business that was open for business, but it could have absolutely been a robbery.
Robert Eidman's specialty in the insurance company was dealing with high-risk drivers, individuals that could not get insurance through traditional places.
So he would accept cash against a lot of people who didn't take cash and advised them not to take cash.
This is a huge murder case in a very small town. And with more questions than answers, St. Charles PD needs help, and boy, do they get it. Enter the elite major case squad.
20 to 30 detectives will respond, and the only thing they will work on for the next 5 days is that situation they've been called out on.
The investigation into Bob Eidman's murder is all hands on deck.
One of the things that we were not able to recover or locate was Robert Eidman's wallet.
Bob's wife Diane said he always carried his wallet in his back pocket. Police are desperate for leads, so they're going to try something unconventional. They cut the back pockets out of Eidman's pants to send for something they call touch DNA testing.
We just thought maybe a sample of skin cells could be found inside Bob's pocket.
It's a newer technology and it's a long shot. Police, meanwhile, canvassed the neighborhood where the crime occurred. They're knocking on doors, they're looking for every clue they can find.
During the area canvass, there's a Mexican grocery store. It's just a couple of doors down. I think it was on the end of this particular strip mall, and they were able to locate some surveillance video.
A white car passing by twice, but the video is grainy.
In that video footage, we saw a Ford Focus. We were not able to get a license plate due to the angle of the camera, and we were not able to see who was in the vehicle.
With lead after lead coming up empty and the clock ticking on that major case squad, Diane Eidman. She remains a subject of, well, we'll call it curiosity. She was, after all, the person closest to Bob.
It is quite routine for police to look at the spouse of someone who's been murdered.
Tough questions need to be asked about the state of the Eidman's marriage.
I took that a step further. Has there been any time that you two argued? Has there been any time that you were unfaithful to him or he was unfaithful to you?
Diane insisted the marriage was fine. But when investigators seize Bob's computers to be analyzed, they make a shocking discovery. Bob's been visiting gay websites online. He's looking for massages and sexual relations.
Bob Eidman had been leading a secret life, and a search of phone records reveals so much more.
We found several calls that were coming in and coming out pretty much the same time each day. We discovered that Bob was having an affair.
A secret relationship with a man who lived more than 3 hours away. Police take a drive to interview him.
He was very forthcoming in the fact that the relationship between him and Bob was an intimate relationship, but very much affectionate and loving. They'd hoped to be together at some point.
It wasn't like a quick fling, kind of out the door kind of thing. I think that's what it was going to be. But we just became good friends and just kept talking from then on.
He says he never visited Bob in St. Charles, but said the two spoke every day and that he loved Bob. The two would stay in motels closer to his hometown when they got together. During the interview with investigators, he rolled up his right sleeve to reveal a tattoo that he said was for Bob.
While doing the search of his home, we located a box the size of a shoebox, and it had cards from Bob. It had receipts from when they'd go to dinner or go to a hotel. He was saving it.
With such tender and strong feelings for Bob, a handful of scenarios leaped to the mind of law enforcement. Could it have been a jilted lover who murdered Bob Eidman?
Feelings can run wild with someone. If I can't have you, nobody's going to have you. It gives people motive.
In theory, a jilted lover made potential sense to investigators, but the man had an alibi. On the date of the murder, he was at work, hours away from St. Charles.
He was on video, and there were numerous people who said, yes, he was here this day. This is the time he clocked in.
After passing a polygraph, Bob's secret lover is cleared. But it's something he tells investigators about Diane that raises red flags.
He called me. He goes, I got some bad news. I said, what? He said, she read one of my emails. He said that Friday night, he said it was a pretty bad night.
Investigators are now zeroing in on Diane. How angry was she when she discovered Bob's secret life? Angry enough to commit murder?
You never met her before? No. I've seen her picture. Would she be angry enough to go in and do that? I hope not.
Days after Bob Eidman is murdered in his office, police discover the long-married insurance agent had a secret male lover, a man whom he met up with for motel room trysts and who he spoke to every day, a man who was devoted to Bob.
Did you guys love each other, or was it just a very close personal relationship? I loved it, but I never said it to him.
The secret lover is alibied out for Bob's killing, but in a frank session with police, he says Bob told him that Diane had discovered their relationship, and he says that Bob had told him Diane's reaction had led to a full-blown argument between the two.
He said that, she said, who's, and, so this is, I think he said this is just, a fantasy deal or what have you. It's what Bob said. She asked him if we were sleeping together, and he said no. He said it was pretty rough that night, that Friday night.
It was up to Detective Stephanie Kaiser, the Diane Whisperer, to broach the delicate subject with Bob's widow while interviewing her at the Eidman's home. Kaiser said Diane told her that she'd learned of her husband's relationship with the man after discovering an email between the two, that Bob denied having an affair, but it was the tone of that email which had deeply hurt her feelings.
She describes it as he's telling him intimate things that he hasn't told me. She's telling me I felt hurt because he wasn't speaking to me that way. So they're married.
What do you think she meant when she said that? What kinds of things were they saying to each other?
I didn't ask the specifics, but I'm just talking to her about it. Did this happen? Could this be a motive?
In Detective Kaiser's account, Diane seemed to be struggling a little bit with the nature of her husband's relationship to the man, or what they did during their time together.
When I'm interviewing Diane, one of the things I asked a lot of different things, to the point where Diane was asking me questions like, are you telling me my husband's gay? I asked her, what did Bob tell you? What are your impressions? Her response back was, he told me no. He was going there to meet with him. They worked together, and he needed the stress relief.
Kaiser said Diane told her that when she learned of the relationship after discovering that email, she and Bob discussed it, but they never argued.
I'm telling Diane, Detective Stepp and Detective Grove are talking to him now. He's saying you guys had a loud, angry argument. She said, I don't know that it was loud and angry. Well, that's what he's saying. You know, Diane, what say you? She said, I told him it was over. I told him he was going to end that friendship. But she said, I don't know if I was yelling and screaming. I go, well, that's what he's saying. I'm just asking. So.
But she laid her foot down. She gave him an
Yes.
ultimatum. You are not to see this guy anymore.
Yes.
As far as you know, did Bob adhere to that ultimatum?
No, he did not.
Diane Eidman finds herself sitting in a polygraph room at the St. Charles Police Department.
So Diane was pretty direct with me. I think she'd had a lot of questions asked of her and then just kind of tells me boldly, I did not do this. I didn't. Diane is just direct.
Diane Eidman voluntarily submitted to a polygraph, and the results came back being inconclusive.
She doesn't pass, but it's inconclusive. So it's just still kind of puts her in that iffy category, if you will.
Adding to investigators' frustration, a day after Diane takes that polygraph test, the clock expires. The major case squad is out of there. 37 officers, 15 different departments had spent more than 2,500 man-hours investigating, with no arrests. A frustrating end to a furious search for answers.
When it goes back to our police department at the time, it is frustrating knowing that you didn't solve this case and it just goes on to an active case file to be looked at as further investigative leads come in.
At that point, I'm assigned the investigation.
The task of solving the murder of Bob Eidman now falls to a junior detective in the department, Don Stepp.
When my sergeant came up and asked if I would like to be assigned this investigation, I was overwhelmed. It's one of those things, am I ready to do this? You don't want to say no, it's an opportunity. I wanted to see this investigation to the end.
Don had contacted me and said, I'm starting from scratch. I'm going to take this entire investigation. I'm going to do everything over again.
What did that feel like to hear?
Well, it was refreshing to, I just felt like there wasn't a lot there.
In 2007, I had only been a detective for 4 years. I was the young guy in the squad.
I had got promoted and I was a police chief at the time, and I didn't want him to feel like there was pressure on him. But he met with me a couple times, and the one time that really struck home is he said, hey, you're like family, and I am going to solve this.
What motivates me to keep going on this investigation is there's someone or someones who had killed Bob Eidman. Bob Eidman needs someone to stand in his corner.
Detective Stepp continues to immerse himself in the details of the case. It had been over a year since Bob Eidman was murdered, when Stepp is at the airport in St. Louis and he spots Diane.
I was off duty, and then I was picking up a family member at the airport, and Diane was walking my direction.
Despite the time that had passed, Diane had never fallen off of Stepp's radar.
Diane Eidman knows that you're keeping a close eye on her, doesn't she?
Yes, sir, she does.
How would you characterize the look on her face when she saw you?
Shock. I believe at that point she thought she was going to be arrested.
But the surprise of a chance encounter pales in comparison to the shock investigators get when they receive a call from the crime lab. Remember that pocket police cut out of Bob Eidman's pants to send for DNA analysis?
It blew my mind when the results came back. It was the golden ticket. This is what we were looking for.
It is 2009. And Diane Eidman is spotted at the airport in St. Louis by Detective Don Stepp.
How would you characterize the look on her face when she saw you?
Shock.
Stepp documents the incident, later learns that Diane took a trip to Las Vegas.
But nothing comes of it.
And if you don't have a suspect right away, then there's things that take time. So things slowed down, but things did not stop.
Face it, there are few, if any, solid leads to pursue, including the identity of that mystery driver whose car was seen on the day of the murder.
They had this famous lead about this car that went around the block, and they had it on video, but there were 22 detectives for 5 days, and they didn't find it.
And there's another lingering piece of evidence still out there. That touch DNA taken from Eidman's back pocket. It was sent to the St. Louis Major Crimes Lab.
Anytime you submitted any kind of DNA information, DNA samples, it was going to be a year or more before you got an answer to it.
Nearly 2 agonizing years after Bob's murder, it's as if this case is frozen in time.
I felt that they were never going to solve the case. I mean, we pray every day. Just, we need peace. We need answers. We need to find out what happened.
It seemed like there were no answers.
No.
Then in March of 2009, that touch DNA from Bob's pocket is forwarded to Bryan Crime.
He's a forensic scientist with the St. Charles County Police Department.
We were contacted by investigators and asked if we could do the DNA on the case.
With almost every angle of the case having been explored and explored again, it all comes down to what Cry could uncover with the DNA analysis.
If we were going to swab the back pocket of a pair of pants, we would cut open the pocket, swab the edges, hoping to get possible DNA. Once I get a swab, I process it and cut the tip off and put it in an extraction tube, and then we load it onto a genetic analyzer that ultimately produces a DNA profile.
But given the cold case backlog, it takes several more months for the DNA to be processed. And when the results come back, investigators get a major break that heats up this cold case.
I developed an unknown male profile. It was a mixture of 2 people. One of those persons was the victim, Robert Eidman, and the other one was an unknown male.
I knew once we obtained the DNA profile, the identity of the individual in Bob Eidman's pocket, I knew that was the golden ticket. I knew that was when we were going to be able to close this case.
That unknown DNA could lead investigators to Bob's killer, so Cry enters the profile into CODIS.
That's a law enforcement database. Hours later, there's a hit.
It hit that same day, and the next day, state gave me the name.
The DNA doesn't match Bob's wife or his secret lover or anyone else the police had been looking into. Instead, it comes back to someone who was never on the investigators' radar.
What did you learn that person's name was?
Paul White.
When the name's first discovered, Detective Stepp is otherwise engaged.
I was on a traffic detail directing traffic.
Did you just want to run up and down the street and tell people we've got our guy?
I was very shocked. My mind was not on directing traffic at that time.
What did you do then?
I started researching Paul White.
Turns out Paul White was no stranger to law enforcement,
having served 15 years in prison for robbery.
When they got the DNA match, Don had contacted me and said, I'm going to solve this. And I truly believed him. I got to give him a lot of credit. You know, he did a lot of old-fashioned work.
This new lead poses even more questions for investigators. Could Diane have hired Paul White to kill Bob, or had White acted alone? When the DNA came in, that didn't seem to exclude her either. The idea being maybe she had hired somebody.
Yes, I mean, it was worked all the way through.
You now have Paul White's DNA on Robert Eidman's pocket at the time of his murder, right?
Yes, sir.
So I assume you want to talk to Paul White.
Yes, sir, I do.
And Paul White was not hard to find.
Paul White was incarcerated at the time when the DNA came back.
How you doing?
And so in September 2010, Detective Stepp pays a visit to Paul White at a maximum security prison in Fulton, Missouri, where he's serving time for forgery.
Do you have any idea why we're here? I wanted him to know right off the bat that we knew he was there. Does this guy look familiar? Never seen him before. I wanted the truth. I wanted to get a confession from Paul. I've got your DNA in his back pocket.
And will that touch DNA evidence be enough to get that confession?
White's leaned back in his chair. He laughed.
It's impossible.
It's not.
It's impossible. It's no way in the world. It's impossible.
What are you thinking when he does that?
I'm thinking this is going to be a long interview.
I'm getting taped and stuff, and I'm what the man.
More than 2 years after Bob Eidman was robbed and murdered in his own insurance office, test results on trace DNA taken from his back pocket are in, and there's a match.
That individual was in the Department of Corrections in Missouri.
What did you learn that person's name was?
Paul White.
As investigators dig deeper into Paul White's background, they uncover a possible connection to Bob. It's been hiding in plain sight.
There was numerous files on Bob's desk, and there was a file, containing Paul White's name.
Among those files is an application for auto insurance. 2 names are listed, Sherry White and her husband, Paul White. Paul White's wife's file was on Bob's desk?
Yes, sir.
What was it doing?
I think when Mr. Eidman had seen the car pull up and saw Paul White exiting the vehicle, he was grabbing Sherry's file to be ready so when he came in.
Investigators quickly clear Sherry White as a suspect in Bob Eidman's murder. With the trail of evidence now leading directly to Paul White, Detective Stepp decides it's time to meet face to face.
This is where the magic happens.
Doesn't look all that magical, does it?
No, it doesn't.
What happens to people when they come into a room like this?
We get to the bottom of facts. This is where people have an opportunity to tell us about what they've done and tell us their story.
Since Paul White is already serving a prison sentence for an unrelated forgery charge, he's literally a captive audience. Let's go back and talk about some of your strategy as you were going to talk to Paul White.
Paul, I believe, was in a little bit of shock after all these years. 2 detectives showing up from St. Charles City. He did not expect that to happen that day. Do you have any idea why we're here? Okay.
Are you thinking the long game at this point, or do you think he's going to start telling you stuff that he knows at that first interview?
I'm thinking to myself, the DNA itself is probably enough to get an arrest warrant, but I didn't want just an arrest warrant. I wanted the truth. Before I ask any questions, you must understand your rights. You don't have to make a statement or answer questions. You have the right to remain silent. Do you understand that? Could you put your initials there, Paul, for me? I think initially Paul White's attitude was very kicked back, relaxed. First of all, do you know a guy named Robert Eidman? Never heard of that guy? I even put a picture down in front of him and asked him, do you know this individual? Does this guy look familiar? Never seen him before. Eventually he came back around and said, yeah, I thought that was his wife's insurance man. That picture I showed you, that's Robert Eidman. Okay, you say kind of looks familiar?
Yeah, that's the guy we got the insurance from.
And I explained that we were working a homicide investigation, and I explained that his DNA was located in his back pocket. Do you think there's any chance that your DNA is going to pop up inside that crime scene?
From a robbery.
From a robbery? No? You come to prison, they take your DNA. Your DNA pops up. You know where it pops up? Swabbing the back pocket of my victim. Your DNA shows up in this guy's back pocket.
That ain't nowhere in the world.
Why don't you think that?
You said that he got robbed. I never robbed the guy. I've been in there one time. and to get insurance. So that's
Exactly.
That's, ain't no
You're telling me you've been in there one time.
Yeah.
And your DNA shows up in this guy's back pocket a month later?
That don't even make sense.
Exactly. With your story, it doesn't make sense.
Again and again during that first interrogation, you tell him, I've got your DNA. I mean, you must have told him, what, 10 or 15 times in the course of that conversation, right?
At least 10 or 15 times. He kept saying, there is no way, repeatedly. He did not believe it.
It's impossible. It's no way in the world. It's impossible.
Paul, it's not impossible.
Okay.
Well, I'm telling you.
I know it's impossible. It's no way in the world.
Then how to get there?
I don't even feel like it was there. It's impossible for it to be there.
After White's adamant and repeated denials about that DNA evidence against him, investigators uncover another critical piece of evidence.
I ran every kind of data history check on him. The big point with Paul White was I found out that a neighboring law enforcement agency had issued a ticket to Paul White after our homicide in a white Ford Focus.
That's right, a white Ford Focus. And remember, that's the very same vehicle make caught on a surveillance camera the day Bob Eidman was murdered.
Paul White was a passenger in that vehicle, and the driver was identified via tickets as Cleo Hines.
Why was the car stopped in the first place?
Registration on the vehicle.
The registration on the vehicle was out of date?
That's correct.
Who was the driver of the car?
The driver of the vehicle was Cleo Hines.
What was significant about that?
We later learned that Cleo Hines was living with Paul White, and his girlfriend was best friends with Paul White's wife.
So they had a long-standing relationship?
Yes, sir.
What was the indication that you had that Cleo Hines might have been involved in the murder of Robert Eidman?
It was Cleo Hines' vehicle.
You were sure of that?
I was sure of that. I had a couple other officers contact Cleo Hines, and they arrested Cleo Hines and brought him to the St. Charles City Police Department.
Does Cleo Hines know a secret that could solve Bob Eidman's murder?
You know a man died, right? You know that? Somebody pulled that trigger.
After several years of lead after lead turning cold, the investigation into Bob Eidman's murder is now heating up as lead detective Don Stepp zeroes in on a new suspect, a man named Cleo Hines.
I was going to take the same approach with Cleo Hines as I did with Paul White. Are you the hardened criminal, or are you a guy that made a mistake?
Let's talk about the robbery. Dude, I know all about it.
I told him we had a positive idea of his vehicle. We had a positive idea of a Focus, a white four-door Focus.
You know your vehicle's on video? Do you know that? You know that Mexican grocery store? There's a video camera inside. So I seen you pull in. Now, you didn't just pull around once, did you? No, like twice. You pulled around twice. Yeah. And that's on camera. Yeah. Then you pulled up.
He knew he owned a white four-door Focus. He knew he was involved in this. There was no way that he could fight that.
Unlike Paul White, Hines immediately starts talking, saying White approached him the day of the murder.
He got a gun in his hand. Okay. He wakes me up out of my sleep, into my head.
He told you he was going to do a robbery?
I basically already knew that because of the gun.
Okay.
And how he was acting. I mean, he ain't had no money.
It took a very short time, and Cleo just started talking and talking and talking.
What kind of handgun do you think it was?
It looked kind of like a 9mm Glock.
A 9mm Glock, the same type of handgun investigators determined was used to murder Bob Eidman. But the question is, who pulled the trigger?
Somebody pulled that trigger. Okay.
It wasn't me, it was him.
Okay.
And Cleo wanted to give his side of the story to defend himself against whatever Paul might say he did.
I told him 2 minutes to drop him. I'm outside, though. He goes and about 5 minutes later, he comes back out.
Did have gloves on?
Paul? Yeah. He has a white gloves. White gloves. They were like cotton, like gloves.
Paul White had been wearing gloves, so Paul White absolutely wasn't going to say anything because he believed his DNA couldn't have been located because he was wearing gloves.
I don't even feel like it was there. It's impossible for it to be there.
So if a perpetrator was wearing a cotton glove when they go into the pocket and digging around, they could leave that DNA that's already on the exterior inside the pocket. Also, if the individual is sweating, it could actually soak through the glove and leave DNA behind that way.
What do you do with those gloves after shooting? In the barbecue pit? Yeah.
Armed with Cleo Hines' confession, Stepp hits the road to Fulton Prison once more for another crack at Paul White.
And I'm gonna tell you right up now, I got a full confession from Cleo Hines. Okay, he told me everything.
But even after Detective Stepp reveals Cleo Hines has accused Paul White of being the gunman, Paul White doesn't blink.
If you got Cleo saying that I did this and that, he's evidently lying to you. And I don't know why he would even say that. I would put a gun to his head and force him to do something.
It's hard to do an interview to get a confession from somebody for a murder. It's really hard to get a confession from somebody for a murder inside prison.
White is arrested the next day, and he's charged with robbery and murder, and could be facing life in prison. Now, with the pressure turned up so high, will he finally change his story?
I've asked you 3 times. Drove 87 miles one way to ask you these questions.
Hypothetically speaking.
Hypothetically. Hypothetically.
If I say I was there, you know what I mean, and I saw everything that happened, you know what I mean, and it's like, that just makes me as guilty. You know, I still get a murder charge, but I didn't kill him. I didn't pull the trigger.
Finally, the dam breaks. Paul White starts talking.
I said, I think he got some cash in there, you know what I mean? So I said, well, you can go in and rob him, but I said, he probably know who I am, so we're gonna have to get some match. We already had those gloves, those cotton gloves that you were talking about. And then we went up to Walmart and they had those little type ski masks.
Paul White describes a chilling scene of a panicked Bob Eidman trying to comply with his assailant's demands for money with that notoriously sticky desk drawer, you know, where Bob kept his money, instead of in a safe.
And then he started shaking it, like, to his drawer and couldn't get the drawer open. And I was like, man, just give me your wallet. And so I reached in his pocket and grabbed the wallet. And Cleo was like, man, no, there's more money there.
There was a lot of finger pointing at each other, trying to point the blame to someone else.
Cleo Hines told police he never even got out of the car at Bob Eidman's office. But Paul White wants police to believe that it was always Hines who had fired the bullets that killed Bob Eidman.
We shot him once. He was like, man, where the rest of the money? Where the rest of the money? And he was like, man, there is no other money. There is no other money. And he shot him again. I'm like, man, what the you doing? I said, man, is he dead? He was like, I don't know. Shot him again. So I'm like, man, we gotta get rid of this gun. You know what I'm saying? I took it and threw it off the bridge.
Paul White offers to help find the murder weapon, riding along in handcuffs in the back seat of a squad car.
We took Paul White out of the St. Charles County Jail.
Going to find the weapon.
And had him point out the area where he got rid of the gun.
I would say, like, right in here.
We searched an extensive area for the gun, was never able to locate it.
Now we have 2 suspects and 2 confessions. And with both men pointing the finger at each other, prosecutors are gearing up to put both of them on trial.
I was sitting in the same room with the person that shot and killed my brother, and that was pretty hard to be calm.
Will Bob Eidman's family finally learn who murdered him? At the climax of a more than 3-year investigation that at one point involved 37 officers, cops finally learned the details of what was stolen the day of Bob Eidman's murder.
How much money was in the wallet?
Wasn't nothing but like $300.
So, how much you
Like
get?
$150 a piece.
$150 a piece. Paul White and Cleo both advised they went to the casino after the homicide and lost the $300 almost immediately.
He went to the casino because that's what he paid a lot. He lost the money. Yeah, basically did for nothing. Right.
It's hard to think about a man's life being taken for $300.
He didn't deserve what he got. He was running a business, trying to make a living, and somebody felt that what he had, they needed too. And so they took it from him. They could have taken his money and left. They didn't have to kill him.
As far as any connection between the two men accused of killing Bob Eidman and Bob's widow, Diane, Paul White revealed to investigators that he didn't even know who she was.
Do you know a woman named Diane?
No.
You don't know a woman named Diane Eidman?
No.
With Paul White and Cleo Hines now both charged with Bob Eidman's murder, it now falls to Detective Stepp to break the news to Diane Eidman, who had long been in his crosshairs.
I met Diane at her place of employment, and I said, Diane, this is over. We have the individuals, and we have the charges on them for killing your husband.
Was she angry at you?
I don't believe she was angry at me. There was a lot of stress that just came off Diane. You could almost see it leaving her body as she was shaking and crying. She was very happy that this was over.
Here, some 5 years after Bob Eidman's murder, Paul White and Cleo Hines are set to stand trial in this courthouse. 2 trials, 2 defendants, with 2 totally different accounts of the crime.
First up at trial, Paul White, who pleaded not guilty to first-degree murder and first-degree robbery.
Really didn't know what to think when I came into trial because I was sitting in the same room with the person that shot and killed my brother. And that was pretty hard.
The trial for Paul White lasted 3 days, which is actually very short for a murder trial in this county.
The trial was swift, and so were the deliberations. The jury needed just 2.5 hours before delivering a verdict. Paul White, guilty of murder and robbery in the first degree.
As for Cleo Hines, he decided not to put his fate in the hands of a jury. Before his trial, he entered what's known as an Alford plea.
An Alford plea is a plea in the state of Missouri where an individual will not say, I did it, but there's enough evidence to say I did it.
With that plea, Hines is convicted of a lesser crime than White, second-degree murder and first-degree robbery. He received 2 life terms, but while Hines' sentence offers the possibility of parole, Paul White will never again see the light of day outside a prison.
Paul White was sentenced to life without parole in the Missouri Department of Corrections.
The investigation into Bob Eidman's murder had cast a shadow of suspicion on his widow, Diane. Now she stood in court and gave her own account of all she had lost. Were you there for Diane's victim impact statement?
Yes, we were. She said, I'm going to be alone for the rest of my life. You took my best friend. You took my husband away from me.
She told the court this in part: I looked over my shoulder for 5 years afraid, never knowing if the people who killed Bob were coming after me, or did the police really believe that I killed my husband?
I do feel like the system worked. The killers were caught. Science prevailed and overwhelmingly provided evidence that got them a conviction. Never again can he come to a Christmas dinner. Never again can we see him for a birthday party. Never again could he and my son talk and have a conversation or a relationship.
He just loved life. I mean, he was always happy and making jokes, making light of things all the time. We talk about him all the time. It's not like he's gone. He's still here with us.
Both Paul White and Cleo Hines have tried.
Those the rocks you're describing, Carlo, coalesced
Fuentes Flores looked at the sight, fell to his knees, and began to sob. "Oh my God, yes," he cried. Underneath the rocks, investigators discovered Nancy's skeletal remains, which had been scattered by animal activity over the course of 7 months. The recovery of her body brought a somber, painful closure to the family. In his final moments with the detectives, Fuentes Flores asked them to apologize to his daughter, recognizing that he would never return home. Justice in the Pass of the Oaks. Carlo Fuentes Flores pleaded not guilty, and his defense team attempted to suppress his confession, arguing that his Miranda warnings should have been administered in Spanish. However, the prosecution presented recorded jail calls, where Fuentes Flores spoke fluent English with his wife, admitting to the crime and expressing remorse for his actions. The judge denied the motion to suppress. Faced with the overwhelming weight of the forensic evidence, the geofencing data, and his own recorded confession, Fuentes Flores opted for a slow plea in January of the year 2022, avoiding a lengthy jury trial. The judge reviewed the evidence and found him guilty of first-degree murder with special circumstances of rape and burglary. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. For the community of Paso Robles, the resolution of the case was a testament to the quiet, relentless dedication of the investigative team and the revolutionary power of forensic technology. Today, Nancy's daughter, Amanda, and her granddaughter carry on her legacy, riding her favorite horse, Montana, through the scenic oak-studded hills, a living tribute to a woman whose faith, love, and memory remain a permanent part of the valley. The duality of the human mask is one of the most enduring themes in the study of criminal psychology. Often, the individuals who commit the most calculated acts of harm are not those who lurk in the dark, but those who stand in the brightest spotlights of our communities. They're the neighbors who wave from across the street, the business owners who receive accolades, the grieving spouses who weep on local television, and the polite laborers who complete their work with quiet diligence. Behind these carefully constructed personas, however, can lie a psychological landscape defined by entitlement, greed, and a profound lack of empathy. To understand these dynamics, we must look closely at two distinct investigations that unfolded in different corners of the American landscape. Both cases involve individuals who believed they had executed the perfect crime, and both demonstrate how modern forensic science, meticulous detective work, and an unwavering commitment to justice can dismantle even the most elaborate deceptions. These narratives serve as powerful studies in human behavior, showing how the truth, though sometimes delayed, inevitably finds its way to the light. The Illusion of Grief, the case of Corey Richens. In the mountain communities of Summit County, Utah, the image of the perfect family is often associated with prosperity, outdoor recreation, and deep-rooted faith. To outward appearances, the Richens family embodied this ideal. Eric Richens was a highly successful 39-year-old business owner who ran a million-dollar stone masonry company known as C&E Masonry. He was a devoted father to 3 young boys, aged 10, 9, and 6, and a respected member of the local community. His wife, Corey Richens, was an ambitious real estate agent and property flipper who sought to build an empire of her own under the name K. Rickon Realty. On a cold night in early March of 2022, this picture of domestic bliss was permanently shattered. Shortly after 3 in the morning, Corey Richens called 911 in a state of apparent panic. She informed the dispatcher that her husband was cold to the touch and not breathing. As the dispatcher guided her through the rhythmic compressions of cardiopulmonary resuscitation, emergency personnel raced to the home. When officers and paramedics arrived, they entered a master bedroom where a life and death struggle was already concluding. Eric Richens lay on his back on the floor, showing no signs of life. Paramedics deployed a mechanical cardiopulmonary resuscitation device, its rhythmic thumping filling the room with a somber cadence. Despite their efforts, Eric was declared dead at 3:58 in the morning. In the immediate aftermath of the tragedy, the narrative seemed straightforward. Corey explained to the responding deputies that she and her husband had been celebrating a major financial milestone for her real estate business earlier. That evening, they had shared a cocktail at 9 at night to toast her contract to purchase a massive unfinished estate in Midway, Utah, valued at nearly $3 million. Corey claimed that after their celebration, she went to sleep in one of her son's bedrooms to comfort him during a night terror. When she awoke and returned to the master bedroom hours later, she found Eric unresponsive. The initial shock of Eric's passing sent shockwaves through the community. How could an athletic, seemingly healthy 39-year-old man die so suddenly? In the early hours of the investigation, some emergency medical technicians hypothesized that Eric might have suffered a sudden brain aneurysm, pointing to a small amount of blood that appeared during resuscitation efforts. This theory offered a temporary, comforting explanation to a grieving family. Yet under Utah law, any sudden, unexpected death of a young, healthy individual requires a thorough forensic autopsy. As the medical examiner began the quiet, scientific examination of Eric's body, Corey turned her focus to a new role. The grieving widow who would guide her children through the dark terrain of loss. Within 1 year of her husband's death, Corey completed and self-published a children's book titled Are You With Me? The book, written from the perspective of a young boy wondering if his deceased father is still present in his life, was presented as a therapeutic tool born from her own family's immense pain. Corey began a promotional tour, appearing on local television programs like Good Things Utah to share her story. To the viewers at home, she was a poignant symbol of resilience. She spoke with soft-spoken vulnerability about the struggles of raising 3 young boys as a single mother and the difficulty of navigating the quiet, lonely hours of the night. She dedicated the book to her late husband, describing him as an amazing partner and a wonderful father. However, beneath this public display of maternal devotion and literary empathy, a very different reality was beginning to emerge. The medical examiner's toxicology report had returned, and its findings were nothing short of explosive. Eric Richins had not died of an aneurysm. He had died of acute drug intoxication. The substance that ended his life was fentanyl, a powerful synthetic opioid. Even more alarming was the concentration, the amount of fentanyl in Eric's system was more than 5 times the lethal limit. Furthermore, the forensic analysis revealed that the substance was illicitly manufactured fentanyl rather than medical-grade prescription medication. This crucial distinction meant that the drug had been obtained from the illicit street market, not a pharmacy. Because Eric had no history of drug abuse or illicit substance use, the presence of such a massive, lethal dose immediately transformed a tragic medical mystery into a suspicious death investigation. As the Summit County Sheriff's Office quietly initiated a criminal inquiry, investigators began to look closely at the financial and personal dynamics within the Richins household. What they discovered was a marriage fractured by hidden debts, secret transactions, and a profound breach of trust. Although the couple appeared to enjoy an affluent lifestyle, Corey's real estate endeavors had placed an immense financial strain on their household. Unbeknownst to Eric, Corey had taken out a $250,000 line of credit against their primary residence, a property that Eric owned solely. When Eric discovered this unauthorized loan in 2020, it caused a severe rift in the marriage. He began consulting with a divorce attorney and took decisive steps to protect his assets and his children. Eric established a private estate plan and a trust, naming his sister, Katie, as the executor and trustee. He placed his business and the family home into the Trust, ensuring that his sons would be the primary beneficiaries in the event of his death. Crucially, he structured the estate so that Corey would be largely excluded from these assets, directly bypassing the prenuptial agreement they had, signed years earlier on their wedding day. The tension surrounding this estate plan erupted into open hostility just 2 days after Eric's death, when Corey attempted to access a safe in the home to locate her husband's will. She discovered that a locksmith had been called and that Eric's sister, Amy, was present to protect the estate. An intense argument ensued, during which Amy informed Corey that she had been excluded from the trust and that the family home was no longer hers. The confrontation escalated to physical violence, resulting in Corey being charged with and subsequently pleading no contest to assault. As detectives dug deeper into Corey's financial records, they realized she was facing a mounting mountain of debt totaling over $4,500,000 owed to more than 20 different lenders. Her ambitious plan to flip the unfinished mansion in Midway was failing under the weight of high-interest, short-term hard money loans. She was desperate for an influx of capital, and her husband's life insurance policies, worth millions of dollars, represented a potential escape route from her financial ruin. The psychological profile of an individual under such extreme financial pressure often reveals a dangerous cognitive distortion known as the illusion of control. Corey appeared to believe that she could orchestrate a series of complex financial and personal maneuvers without detection. But as investigators analyzed her digital footprint, the pieces of a much darker puzzle began to fall into place. Through a private investigator hired by the Richens family and subsequent police search warrants, detectives gained access to Corey's phone records and text messages. They discovered that in the months leading up to Eric's death, Corey had been in constant communication with a woman named Carmen Lauber, an acquaintance who had previously worked for Corey's family cleaning houses. Carmen had a history of involvement with illicit drugs. When investigators confronted Carmen, she eventually agreed to cooperate in exchange for immunity. Her testimony was damning. Carmen revealed that Corey had approached her on 2 separate occasions to procure powerful prescription pain medication, specifically requesting illicit fentanyl. According to Carmen, Corey had complained that the first batch of pills she received was not strong enough, prompting a second purchase of stronger substances shortly before Eric's death. The timeline of these drug transactions aligned chillingly with physical ailments Eric had suffered in the weeks prior to his demise. During a trip to Greece in 2019, Eric had become violently ill after consuming a drink prompting him to tell his sister that he believed Corey was attempting to poison him. Then, on Valentine's Day of 2022, Corey purchased a breakfast sandwich from a local bagel shop and left it for Eric with a loving note. After taking a single bite, Eric suffered a severe medical reaction requiring the use of his son's epinephrine autoinjector and a large dose of antihistamines before he could stabilize. He texted a close friend later that day, stating that he believed his wife had tried to poison him and writing that she had almost succeeded. Despite these terrifying episodes, Eric had chosen to remain in the home, perhaps driven by a desire to protect his 3 young sons and a hope that counseling might salvage their family unit. It was a decision that would prove fatal. In May of 2023, the Summit County Sheriff's Office made their move. Corey Richens was arrested and charged with aggravated murder and possession of controlled substances with the intent to distribute. The arrest sent shockwaves through the community and captured national media attention. The juxtaposition of a children's book author writing about grief while being accused of murdering the very father she claimed to mourn was a narrative that fascinated and horrified the public. As Corey awaited trial in the Summit County Jail, her defense team, led by Sky Lozaro, prepared to challenge the state's case, arguing that the prosecution's evidence was purely circumstantial and lacked any direct proof of how the fentanyl had been administered. However, Corey's difficulties only multiplied while she was in custody. During a routine search of her jail cell, deputies discovered a handwritten 4-page letter hidden in her belongings. The letter, which began with the phrase "walk the dog," appeared to be a set of instructions intended for Corey's mother. In it, Corey outlined a detailed narrative that she wanted her brother, Ronnie, to present to the court. The instructions suggested that Ronnie should testify that Eric had admitted to obtaining pain pills and fentanyl from workers at his ranch in Mexico. The prosecution immediately seized upon this letter as clear evidence of witness tampering, arguing that Corey was attempting to manufacture a false defense from behind bars. Although the defense claimed the letter was merely a portion of a fictional manuscript or confidential attorney-client work product, the court ruled it admissible, adding a significant layer of consciousness of guilt to the state's case. By the time the trial commenced, the prosecution had also uncovered a potential romantic motive. Investigators discovered that Corey had been engaged in a years-long affair with a handyman named Josh Grossman. Their text messages, filled with declarations of love and dreams of a shared future, revealed that Corey had envisioned a life where she and Josh would live together on the Midway. estate funded by the wealth she stood to inherit. In one particularly chilling exchange sent less than 48 hours before Eric's death, Corey urged Josh to hang in there until Friday, promising that their lives would soon be different. The trial of Corey Richins unfolded in a small courthouse nestled in the mountains near Park City. The courtroom was packed with family members, reporters, and curious onlookers. The prosecution, led by Brad Bloodworth, presented a meticulous case that connected the financial desperation, the secret, drug purchases, the suspicious illnesses, and the digital evidence into a coherent narrative of premeditated murder. One of the most dramatic moments of the trial came when Josh Grossman took the stand. Looking uncomfortable and emotional, he testified about his relationship with Corey and recounted a conversation they had shared in her car in the weeks following Eric's death. According to Josh, Corey had asked him if he had ever killed anyone during his military service in Iraq, and then asked how it had made him feel. The sincerity of his testimony contrasted with the calculating nature of the text displayed on the screen had a visible impact on the 8-member jury. In a surprising turn of events, the defense team, which had recently transitioned to public defenders Kathy Nestor and Wendy Lewis, chose to rest their case without calling a single witness or presenting any testimony. They argued that the state had failed to meet its burden of proof, emphasizing that no physical trace of fentanyl had been found in the home and that the prosecution could not prove how the drug entered Eric's system. Ultimately, the jury was not swayed by the defense's arguments. After deliberating for less than 3 hours, they returned with a unanimous verdict: guilty of aggravated murder and all associated charges. For the family of Eric Richins, the verdict brought a profound sense of relief and definitive closure. The bright light that had been taken from their lives could not be replaced, but justice had been served. The 3 young boys who had lost their father to violence and their mother to her own ambition were placed in the loving custody of Eric's sister, ensuring they would grow up surrounded by the values their father held dear. Corey Richins, the woman who had sought to write her own story of wealth, success, and strategic grief, had instead written her way into a cell, serving as a sobering reminder of the destructive power of greed and the inevitable triumph of truth. The Vanishing from Paradise, the case of Nancy Woodrum. While the high-profile drama of the Richins case unfolded in the mountain valleys of Utah, a different kind of mystery had transpired several years earlier in the rolling oak-studded hills of Paso Robles, California. Known for its scenic vineyards, horse ranches, and quiet rural charm, Paso Robles is a community where residents value their privacy and peace. In May of 2018, this peace was shattered by the sudden, inexplicable disappearance of 62-year-old Nancy Woodrum. Nancy was a beloved local hairdresser who owned a popular salon called The Strand. She was known for her warmth, her generous spirit, and her deep devotion to her faith as a Jehovah's Witness. Following the death of her husband, Robert, a few years earlier, Nancy lived alone on a beautiful, secluded property on El Faro Road, which she had named Paradise Ranch. Nancy's property featured a large, two-story Victorian main house, which she operated as a successful vacation rental, and a smaller, adjacent cottage where she resided. On the weekend of May 4th, 2018, a large party of 24 wedding guests checked into the main house to celebrate a vineyard wedding. Nancy met the bride, offering a warm welcome and a gentle hug, before retreating to her private cottage. The following day, Saturday, May 5th, Nancy's daughter, Amanda, received a concerning phone call. Her mother had failed to appear for a scheduled Bible study, an occurrence that was highly uncharacteristic for the devout Nancy. Amanda asked a neighbor to check on her mother. When the neighbor arrived, she found the front door of the cottage wide open, the television blaring, and no sign of Nancy. Sensing that something was terribly wrong, Amanda rushed to the property. As she stepped inside the cottage, her worst fears were realized. On the floor lay two large, dark stains that appeared to be blood. On a nearby bench sat Nancy's purse, her keys, her cell phone, and her tablet. Her two vehicles remained parked in the driveway. Looking closer, Amanda observed what appeared to be blood spatter on the walls, the headboard of the bed, and a nearby cabinet. A beige pillow on the bed was heavily stained with blood. Amanda immediately called 911, initiating an intensive search and rescue operation. The San Luis Obispo County Sheriff's Office dispatched deputies and investigators to the scene, including Senior Deputy Clinton Cole. As Cole examined the cottage, he recognized all the hallmarks of a violent struggle. There were no signs of forced entry, suggesting that Nancy may have opened the door to someone she knew, or that the perpetrator had entered through an unlocked door in the quiet hours of the night. The complexity of the investigation was immediately compounded by the presence of the wedding guests in the main house, with more than 20 individuals staying on the property. Investigators had to consider the possibility that a guest or someone associated with the wedding was involved. The property was cordoned off as an active crime scene, turning what should have been a weekend of joy into a tense, chaotic environment. Detectives began the arduous task of interviewing every single wedding guest, attempting to establish a timeline and identify any suspicious activity, despite the proximity of the main house to Nancy's cottage, separated by only a single wall. No one reported hearing a struggle, a scream, or the sound of a vehicle. The bride explained that she had inserted earplugs before going to sleep around 11:15 on Friday night, a detail that explained her silence but offered no clues to the investigators. One particular wedding guest drew temporary suspicion when he appeared, uncooperative and evasive during initial phone interviews. Detectives traveled to his home in Northern California to conduct a face-to-face interview and collect a voluntary deoxyribonucleic acid sample. However, after reviewing photos on his wife's phone that placed him firmly at the rehearsal dinner miles, away at the time of Nancy's disappearance, he was cleared of any involvement. As the search for Nancy expanded into the surrounding foothills and dry riverbeds, investigators received a critical break from an unexpected source. On Saturday evening, an officer with the California Highway Patrol located a bundle of discarded bedding and clothing on the side of La Ponza Road, approximately 6 miles from Nancy's home. The items included a blood-stained pillow, a dress, a pair of shorts, and a shirt. When shown these items, Amanda confirmed with a heavy heart that they belonged to her mother. The discovery suggested a grim reality. Nancy had been wrapped in her own bedding and transported from the property, likely suffering from severe injuries. The timeline of the abduction was narrowed significantly when forensic analysts examined Nancy's phone records. They discovered that at 12:17 in the morning on Saturday, an attempt had been made to call 911 from Nancy's phone. The call had been terminated in less than a second, indicating that the perpetrator had likely wrested the phone from her hands or forced her to end the call. This brief, aborted emergency call provided a precise timestamp for the violent encounter, with the wedding guests cleared and the physical evidence offering few immediate answers. Investigators turned their attention to other individuals who had access to the property. Nancy had recently decided to sell Paradise Ranch so that she could devote herself full-time to her faith and missionary work. 2. Prepare the home for sale, she had hired a variety of local contractors, painters, and laborers. One individual of interest was Sean Bloom, a general contractor who had recently been fired by Nancy after a heated dispute over unfinished work and unpaid fees. Text messages between the two revealed a significant level of animosity, with Sean threatening legal action. However, when contacted by detectives, Sean cooperated fully and voluntarily submitted a deoxyribonucleic acid sample, which did not match the foreign profile found on the bloody pillow in Nancy's room. Detectives also investigated Nancy's son, Chad, with whom she had experienced a strained, distant relationship due to religious differences. Chad was initially resistant to cooperating and refused to provide a genetic sample. Investigators placed him under surveillance, eventually collecting discarded beer bottles after he was stopped for driving with an open container. The subsequent laboratory analysis cleared him of any involvement, leaving investigators with a rapidly cooling case and no viable suspects. In the face of this investigative standstill, the San Luis Obispo County Sheriff's Office decided to employ a sophisticated and relatively novel investigative tool, geofencing. This technology allows investigators to establish a virtual boundary around a specific geographic area during a precise time frame and request records from Google to identify any cellular devices that were active within that boundary. Because Paradise Ranch was located in a remote, rural area with very little ambient foot or vehicle traffic, a geofence around the property during the hours surrounding the 12:17 morning 911 call was highly likely to yield clean, relevant data. After obtaining the necessary search warrants, investigators received the data from Google. When they mapped the coordinates, they observed a device that had pinged inside Nancy's cottage at 1:33 and 1:52 in the morning on Saturday. This device did not belong to Nancy, nor did it belong to any of the wedding guests. When investigators served a follow-up warrant to obtain the subscriber information for that specific device, the name that returned was one they recognized: Carlo Fuentes Flores. Carlo Fuentes Flores was a local painter who had been hired by Nancy's general contractor to paint the decks and exterior trim of the property. During previous interviews, Carlo had been described as a polite, mild-mannered family man who worked hard and adored his young daughter. He had cooperated with detectives during their initial inquiries, expressing sadness over Nancy's disappearance and recounting how she had kindly given him tamales and shared scriptures with him during his work. The revelation that his phone was active inside Nancy's private quarters in the middle of the night shattered his image of quiet professionalism. Detectives began a deep dive into Carlo's background and digital history. They discovered a stark dichotomy between his daytime persona and his private behavior. His search history was filled with queries for mature adult content and local escort services. Furthermore, his phone contained numerous self-shot videos of anonymous encounters, revealing a secret life of compulsion and infidelity. To secure an arrest, investigators needed physical evidence that placed Carlo directly at the scene of the violence. They initiated surveillance, following him to a local restaurant where he had lunch with his wife. When he departed, detectives collected a plastic bottle he had used. The subsequent analysis of the touch deoxyribonucleic acid on the bottle provided a match to the bloody handprint found on the pillow in Nancy's bedroom. With the genetic match confirmed, detectives brought Carlo in for questioning. The interrogation, conducted by Clinton Cole, was a masterclass in progressive pressure. Initially, Carlo maintained his innocent facade, smiling and discussing his painting work and his respect for Nancy. However, as Cole slowly introduced the physical evidence, letting Carlo know that his genetic profile had been found on the bloody pillow, the painter's composure dissolved. His posture slumped, his breathing became shallow, and he confessed that he had made a mistake. In an initial attempt to minimize his culpability, Carlo claimed that he had returned to the property in the middle of the night to retrieve a ladder for a job the next day. He alleged that as he was backing up his vehicle, accidentally struck Nancy, who had walked outside to investigate the noise. He claimed he brought her back inside the cottage to help her, and that she had subsequently collapsed. Detectives immediately challenged this narrative, pointing out that an accidental vehicular strike did not explain the extensive blood spatter on the headboard, the struggle in the bedroom, or the genetic evidence on the pillow. Realizing that his initial lie was unsustainable, Carlo finally confessed to the full, horrifying truth. He admitted that he had gone to the property that night with the explicit intent of assaulting Nancy. He entered her cottage, struck her repeatedly to subdue her, and assaulted her. When she attempted to call 911, he took the phone and ended the call. To ensure she could not identify him, he held a pillow over her face for 40 minutes until she ceased breathing. He then wrapped her body in her bedding, loaded her into his truck, and drove east into the desolate expanse of the Carrizo Plain, where he discarded her remains. In a striking moment during the interrogation, Carlo offered to lead detectives to the location where he had left Nancy's body. Investigators placed him in a vehicle and traveled over an hour into the remote, arid landscape on the border of Kern County. The territory was vast and featureless, and for several hours it appeared that Carlo might not be able to locate the exact spot. However, after stopping at several locations, he pointed toward a small, unnatural pile of rocks. There, exposed to the elements and scattered by local wildlife, lay the remains of Nancy Woodrum. For the investigators and Nancy's family, the discovery was a somber, devastating moment, but it represented the end of an agonizing search and the beginning of the legal process to hold her killer accountable. In January of 2022, rather than proceed with a public trial that would subject his family to further distress, Carlo Fuentes Flores entered a slow plea of guilty to first-degree murder with special circumstances. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Though Nancy's family would forever carry the pain of her loss, they found comfort in her memory and her deep faith. Her daughter, Amanda, continued the family tradition of horseback riding, finding peace in the quiet hills where her mother had once ridden, carrying forward a legacy of grace, resilience, and faith. The psychological dimensions of deception. When we analyze the cases of Corey Richins and Carlo Fuentes Flores, we see two distinct variations of a common psychological phenomenon: the compartmentalization of a destructive double life. Both individuals operated within respectable social structures, maintaining relationships and roles that shielded them from suspicion while harboring internal motives that eventually led to violence. Corey Richins was driven by a powerful sense of entitlement and a desire to maintain an illusion of wealth and success at all costs. In her mind, obstacles to her ambition, her mounting debts, and her husband's protective estate planning could be eliminated through a calculated act of violence. Her subsequent behavior, particularly the writing of a grief book and her public media appearances, displays a chilling level of cognitive dissonance. She sought to profit from the very tragedy she had manufactured, using the language of empathy and maternal care to construct a fortress of innocence. Carlo Fuentes Flores, conversely, was driven by a hidden life of sexual compulsion and entitlement that escalated from digital fantasies to physical violence. He targeted a vulnerable woman who had shown him nothing but kindness, misinterpreting her generosity as an invitation. His daytime persona as a polite, hard-working family man was a highly effective shield, one that might have protected him indefinitely if not for the silent, objective tracking of modern technology. Both cases underscore the vital role of investigative diligence and forensic science in modern law enforcement, whether through the analysis of deleted digital messages and financial records, or the deployment of innovative geofencing and genetic matching. The tools of modern detection are increasingly capable of piercing even the most sophisticated masks of deception. Ultimately, these stories are not merely accounts of criminal behavior, but testaments to the resilience of families, the dedication of investigators, and the quiet, persistent triumph of justice. By remembering the lives of Eric, Richens, and Nancy Woodrum, we honor their memory and reaffirm our collective commitment to a society where the truth is pursued, the vulnerable are protected, and those who do harm are held to account. The passage of the Oaks. The scenic tranquility of California is often defined by its geography, where the rolling hills of the Central Coast offer a natural sanctuary from the frantic pace of the major metropolitan areas. Nestled almost precisely halfway between San Francisco and Los Angeles lies the community of Paso Robles, a name derived from the original Spanish designation meaning the Pass of the Oaks. It is a region characterized by its expansive vineyards, century-old oak trees, and equestrian ranches. For many, it represents a modern paradise, a place where families build legacies and visitors escape to experience a quiet, almost fairy tale existence. Yet, in the spring of 2018, this pastoral landscape became the backdrop for a tragedy that would challenge the local community and test the limits of modern forensic science. On Friday, the 4th of May, 2018, a large group of wedding guests arrived at a secluded vacation rental property known as Paradise Ranch, located along El Faro Road. The property, featuring a grand 2-story Victorian residence and a smaller guest cottage, have been meticulously remodeled by its owner, 62-year-old Nancy Woodrum. Nancy was a well-known and deeply respected figure in the Paso Robles community, operating a popular hair salon. Downtown, she was described by friends, family, and clients as a person of remarkable warmth, generous spirit, and devout faith. Following the passing of her husband several years prior, she had chosen to turn the beautiful property they had built together into a vacation rental with the ultimate goal of downsizing so she could devote her life to full-time volunteer ministry. The wedding guests, who had traveled to the area for a celebration at a local winery, found the ranch to be an idyllic setting. The bride, staying in the guest house with her bridesmaids, met Nancy shortly after their arrival. Nancy welcomed them with a warm embrace, exemplifying the hospitality for which she was known. She informed the guests that she would be staying in a small apartment located elsewhere on the property, nearby but separate, to ensure they had complete privacy. The celebration proceeded as planned, but by the following morning, the tranquility of Paradise Ranch was shattered. On Saturday, the 5th of May, Amanda, Nancy's daughter, received an unsettling telephone call. Her mother had failed to appear for a scheduled morning Bible study, an omission that was entirely out of character for a woman of her disciplined habits and deep religious devotion. Concerned, Amanda requested that a neighbor visit the property to check on her mother. The neighbor arrived at the cottage and encountered a scene that immediately generated alarm. The front door of the residence was wide open. The television was blaring at a high volume, yet there was no sign of Nancy. When Amanda arrived shortly thereafter, her anxiety deepened into dread. Inside the cottage, Nancy's personal belongings, including her purse, car keys, cellular phone, and digital tablet, remained untouched on a bench. Her 2 vehicles were parked outside. Upon closer inspection, Amanda discovered ominous signs of a violent struggle. There was a significant stain on the carpet, her mother's bedding, and sheets were entirely missing from the bed, and blood was visible on a remaining pillow. Spotting what appeared to be blood spatter on the adjacent walls, Amanda immediately contacted emergency services. The dispatch operator received the call at the emergency line, and law enforcement was immediately dispatched to the scene. The quiet vacation home was rapidly transformed into a secured crime scene, cordoned off with yellow tape as investigators, search dogs, and helicopters descended upon the property. The presence of more than 20 wedding guests who were returning to the ranch, unaware of the unfolding crisis, presented investigators with an immediate and complex challenge. These individuals, initially seeking a weekend of joy, suddenly found themselves categorized as potential persons of interest in a missing person case that bore all the hallmarks of abduction. Senior Deputy Clint Cole, a veteran officer with the San Luis Obispo County Sheriff's Office, was off duty when he received the call from his supervisor, requesting his assistance with a highly suspicious missing person case. Upon his arrival at El Faro Road, the atmosphere was tense. The initial responding deputies briefed him on the situation, expressing a collective sense that something was terribly wrong. As Deputy Cole approached the cottage, he noted the absence of any signs of forced entry. This suggested 2 distinct possibilities. Either the victim knew her assailant, or she had been caught entirely off guard in a state of vulnerability. Upon entering the bedroom, the physical evidence of violence was stark. 2 large bloodstains marred the floor. On the headboard of the bed, the adjacent cabinet, and the back wall, fine droplets of blood spatter were visible. A beige pillow left on the bed also bore significant blood contamination. To an experienced investigator, the scene spoke with quiet clarity. Nancy Woodrum had been assaulted within her sanctuary and removed from her home against her will. The complexity of the investigation intensified as night fell on Saturday. While forensic teams processed the cottage, a significant discovery was made. Approximately 6 miles away on La Ponza Road, an officer with the highway patrol located several items discarded on the roadside, including bedding, a pillow, a woman's dress, a pair of shorts, and a shirt. The bedding, featuring a distinctive gingham pattern, was immediately recognized as matching the remaining linen elements from Nancy's cottage. When shown these items, Amanda confirmed with a heavy heart that they belonged to her mother. The discovery of these blood-stained personal items on a rural roadside miles from the home effectively shifted the focus of the investigation. It was no longer merely a search for a missing person. It was now treated as a suspected homicide. The immediate task for investigators was to systematically evaluate the vast pool of potential suspects, with over 20 wedding guests residing on the property. Detectives had to establish a comprehensive timeline of the evening's events. The guests had attended a rehearsal dinner at a local winery, returning to the property late on Friday night. Most of the guests were fully accounted for, but one individual's initial reluctance to cooperate drew the attention of detectives. In the realm of criminal psychology, non-cooperative behavior during the initial stages of an investigation is a well-documented phenomenon. It does not automatically denote guilt. Often, it stems from a distrust of authority, personal anxiety, or a desire to avoid involvement in a distressing situation. However, for investigators tasked with finding a missing woman, such resistance represents a critical path that must be thoroughly explored. After several attempts to clarify the individual's timeline via telephone proved frustrating, investigators traveled to the guest's residence in Northern California. Confronted in person, the man's demeanor changed from defensive to cooperative. His wife provided photographic evidence confirming his presence at the rehearsal dinner during the critical hours of Nancy's disappearance, and he voluntarily provided a sample of his genetic material. This eliminated him from suspicion, allowing the team to redirect their focus elsewhere. As the search for Nancy continued across the rugged foothills and dry riverbeds surrounding Paso Robles, investigators turned their attention to other individuals who had recent access to the property. Nancy had recently decided to put Paradise Ranch on the market, wishing to downsize to dedicate her time to her faith. In preparation for the sale, several contractors, painters, plumbers, and handymen had been working on the estate. Among these service providers was a general contractor named Sean Bloom, with whom Nancy had reportedly experienced a highly contentious professional relationship. According to reports, the dispute had escalated to the point where Nancy had terminated his services and withheld payment pending the escrow. Closure of the property. In text messages exchanged between the two, the contractor had threatened legal action, expressing deep frustration. When interviewed by detectives, the contractor made no secret of his dislike for Nancy, confirming the professional friction. However, his candor and subsequent voluntary submission of a genetic sample ultimately cleared him of any physical involvement in her disappearance. During the search of Nancy's cottage, forensic technicians made a discovery that would prove pivotal. Detective Janine performing a meticulous examination of the bedroom, climbed a ladder to inspect the scene from an elevated perspective. From this vantage point, she observed a partial handprint on a pillow. The pattern of the print suggested that the pillow had been held with significant force, possibly utilized as a mechanism to smother or silence the victim. Technicians successfully retrieved a profile of male genetic material from the center of the bloody print. This genetic profile was submitted to the national database, but it yielded no matches, indicating that the source had no prior felony convictions on record. The investigation reached a difficult plateau. The wedding guests had been cleared, the contentious contractor had been ruled out, and the genetic material from the crime scene remained anonymous. It was at this juncture that the investigative team decided to employ a sophisticated and relatively novel technology known as a Google geofence. A geofence search warrant allows law enforcement to request anonymized location data from Google for devices that were present within a specific geographic boundary during a precise window of time. To establish this window, investigators relied on a critical piece of evidence. Nancy's telephone records revealed an attempted 911 call placed from her device at 12:17 in the morning on the night of her disappearance. The call had lasted 40 seconds, suggesting it had been abruptly terminated almost immediately. After initiation, this provided detectives with an incredibly precise temporal anchor. Upon serving the warrant, Google returned data indicating the presence of a device within the virtual boundary of Nancy's property during the early morning hours of Saturday. The data showed a device pinging inside Nancy's studio apartment at 1:33 and again at 1:52 in the morning. This was a critical revelation. The device did not belong to any of the cleared wedding guests, nor did it correspond to Nancy's own phone. When investigators obtained the subscriber information for the device, the name that returned was one they already possessed: Carlo Fuentes Flores. Carlo Fuentes Flores was a local painter who had been contracted to work on the Decks of the main house at Paradise Ranch. When initially contacted by phone-in, the early days of the investigation, he had been exceptionally polite, cooperative, and helpful. He had recalled working on the property on the Thursday prior to the disappearance, noting that Nancy had been very kind to him, even offering him a tamale as a gesture of appreciation. He had expressed shock and sadness over her disappearance, and detectives had initially found no reason to suspect him. He was a family man, a father with no criminal record in either the United States or Mexico. The revelation that his cellular device was present inside Nancy's residence in the quiet hours of the morning, long after his working hours had concluded, shattered his facade of innocence. However, location data alone is rarely sufficient to secure a conviction in a capital case. A defense attorney could argue that the phone was lost, borrowed, or that the location data was inaccurate. The prosecution required physical proof. Investigators initiated a discreet surveillance operation on Fuentes Flores, utilizing specialized units trained in tracking suspects without detection. The objective was to obtain a sample of his genetic material from a discarded item. In a public space, a legally permissible method of collection that did not require a warrant or alert the suspect to their focus. The surveillance team followed Fuentes Flores as he went to a local restaurant with his wife. After he consumed a beverage from a plastic bottle and left it on the table, officers secured the container. The laboratory analyzed the genetic material from the bottle and compared it to the profile retrieved from the bloody handprint on the pillow in Nancy's cottage. It was an exact match. Armed with this irrefutable physical link, detectives Cole and his partner brought Fuentes Flores in for interrogation. The subsequent recorded interview is a masterclass in modern investigative technique, illustrating the psychological transition of a suspect from confident denial to total capitulation. Initially, Fuentes Flores maintained his polite, cooperative demeanor, discussing his painting work on the property and claiming he had no knowledge of Nancy's fate. Detectives systematically established his familiarity with the layout of the ranch, ensuring he confirmed on camera that he knew where Nancy's studio was located. As the interview progressed, detectives introduced the genetic evidence. They explained that their investigation had been exhaustive, spanning thousands of hours, and that they possessed scientific proof of his presence in the room. Confronted with the reality of the genetic match, Fuentes Flores' physical posture visibly changed. The confidence evaporated, replaced by the physiological markers of intense stress. He admitted that he had made a mistake. In an attempt to minimize his culpability, a common psychological defense mechanism among perpetrators of violent crimes, Fuentes Flores initially claimed. That Nancy's death was the result of a tragic accident. He asserted that he had returned to the property late at night to retrieve a ladder for a subsequent job. While backing up his vehicle, he claimed he had accidentally struck Nancy, who had walked behind his truck. He alleged that he had carried her back into her cottage to assist her, where she subsequently collapsed. Detectives, recognizing the absurdity of the accident scenario in light of the blood spatter and the handprint on the pillow, pressed further. They questioned him regarding the sexual nature of the assault. Fuentes Flores, realizing the futility of his initial fabrication, confessed that he had consumed a significant amount of alcohol that evening and had entered the residence with the explicit intention of assaulting her. He admitted to sexually assaulting Nancy and subsequently smothering her with the pillow to prevent her from reporting the crime. He had then wrapped her body in her own bedding, loaded her into his vehicle, and driven east into the remote, desolate expanse of the Carrizo Plain. During the interrogation, detectives presented Fuentes Flores with a digital map, hoping he could identify the location where he had left Nancy's remains. In a surprising development, the suspect offered to personally guide investigators to the site. The journey from the station took approximately 1 hour, leading the caravan of law enforcement vehicles away from the fertile valleys of Paso Robles and into the arid, rugged terrain of the Carrizo Plain. The vastness of the landscape presented a daunting challenge. A body left in such an environment is subject to the elements and wildlife, making recovery exceptionally difficult if the location is not precise. After stopping at several incorrect locations, Fuentes Flores grew visibly anxious, struggling to orient himself in the uniform landscape. Finally, at a specific turnoff, Detective Cole spotted a small, unnatural arrangement of stones stacked in a circle off the side of the dirt road. Confronted with the sight, Fuentes Flores fell to his knees and wept. Investigators approached the rocky circle and located the skeletal remains of Nancy Woodrum. The elements and wildlife had taken a heavy toll, but the recovery of her remains provided the family with the definitive answers they had desperately sought for months. Following the recovery, Fuentes Flores was returned to the station, where he provided a full, detailed confession documenting the precise sequence of his actions on that fateful night. He also wrote a letter of apology to Nancy's children and his own family, expressing remorse for the lives he had destroyed. In January of 2022, as the case was set to proceed to trial, Fuentes Flores chose to enter a slow plea, a legal maneuver where the defendant waives the right to a jury trial and allows a judge to determine guilt based on the written record of evidence, while preserving certain limited rights to appeal. The judge reviewed the extensive evidence, including the confessions, the location tracking data, and the genetic matches, and found Fuentes Flores guilty of first-degree murder with the special circumstances of rape and burglary. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. For Nancy's family, the conclusion of the legal proceedings brought a quiet sense of justice, though the void left by her absence remains. Amanda, carrying on her mother's profession and her love for equestrian activities, now rides her mother's beloved horse, Montana, alongside her own daughter, passing down the legacy of a woman whose life was defined by love, faith, and community, rather than the tragic circumstances of her death. The repercussions of deception, the discussion of loss and grief with children is one of the most delicate challenges a parent can face. It requires a gentle hand, a compassionate heart, and an honest approach to the complex emotions that follow the departure of a loved one. In the spring of 2023, a young mother from Summit County, Utah, gained national attention for her efforts to address this very issue. Corey Richens, a 33-year-old widow and mother of 3 young boys, self-published a children's book titled Are You With Me?, designed to help young minds cope with the sudden passing of a parent. Corey appeared on local television and radio programs, presenting herself as a bereaved young woman navigating the profound grief of losing her 39-year-old husband, Eric Richens, who had passed away unexpectedly a year prior. She spoke eloquently about the struggle her sons, aged 10, 9, and 6, were experiencing, and how the book served as a tool for healing, illustrating that although a father may no longer be physically present, his spirit remains to guide them through life's milestones. To the public, Corey was a figure of inspiration, a resilient mother turning personal tragedy into a resource for others. However, behind this carefully constructed narrative of maternal devotion and creative healing lay a complex web of financial instability, domestic discord, and a dark secret that would soon capture the attention of the nation. In the early morning hours of the 4th of March, 2022, Corey Richens placed a frantic call to 911. She reported that her husband, Eric, was unresponsive, cold to the touch, and not breathing. Emergency medical technicians and sheriff's deputies arrived at the family's expansive home in Kamas, Utah, to find Eric lying on the floor of the master bedroom. Despite the immediate initiation of cardiopulmonary resuscitation and the utilization of automated compression devices, Eric was pronounced dead at the scene. The initial observations made by first responders raised immediate questions. A significant amount of biological fluid was present, which led one of the on-scene emergency technicians to hypothesize that Eric may have suffered an internal hemorrhage or a ruptured brain aneurysm. Corey, visibly distraught, informed officers that she and Eric had been celebrating a successful business transaction earlier that evening. She explained that she had prepared a mixed drink for him to mark the occasion, after which she had gone to sleep in her son's bedroom to comfort the child during a night terror. Upon returning to her own bedroom hours later, she claimed she found her husband unresponsive. When questioned about his medical history, Corey and her mother, Lisa, suggested several possibilities, including chronic complications from Lyme disease, weekly allergy treatments, or a potential adverse reaction to a sleep aid or a tetrahydrocannabinol gummy. To those who knew